So let me give you a quick couple of examples by what I mean by cross-training. One time, several years ago, I found myself in a 10-day silent retreat meditation. Anybody familiar with Goenka? Several of you. This was in Igatpuri in western India, and it was a 10-day silent retreat meditation. And one of the hours every day was an incredible gift as well as an incredible challenge. I'm not a big fan of the Zen practice where you shouldn't ever be concerned about your knees. You have to sit zazen and you have to transcend the pain in your knees. A lot of people blow out their knees and have a lifelong problem with that. Bad idea. However, I did notice that I was able to come into relationship with this admonition that 1 hour every day, we want you to sit there motionless. No movement at all other than the inhalation and the exhalation of the breath. You can imagine what happens after 10, 15 minutes, and it goes on and on. The first time I was doing this, I had an unexpected coefficient of adversity come into play. I noticed it was about 95 degrees in the room as well. And one of the things we always used in the evening there were mosquito nets, but we didn't have them in the meditation hall. And after about minute 35 or so, I noticed the mosquito landing right here in my left cheek. And the, adaptive impulse right away was, but no, I didn't do that. But it was such an amazing process to feel the proboscis of the mosquito insert itself into my cheek. And you can imagine the initial sort of irritation becomes an increasing stinging kind of, pain that's going on. And, he filled up completely, and I'm just sort of breathing through this whole thing. But what was fascinating is I noticed I could actually do that, and I was reminded of the 3 dimensions of learning when Siddhartha in Hesse's book was asked, what have you learned? Well, what I can do is I can think, I can fast, and I can wait. And I noticed how important that practice of just sitting allowed me to wait in a way, to be present, which is so fundamentally important in the work that we do with clients, to hold an evenly suspended attention, a free-floating attention that allows us to be in the midst of all sorts of irritation sometimes. I worked for a dozen years with inner-city kids in East Oakland. And that mosquito helped me in various moments with these kids who were extremely generous in giving me learning opportunities, time and again, about myself. The book that I'm passing around is an example of what you'll see, those of you who haven't seen it yet, is a practice that I do that combines cross-training of a variety of things. I love to run. I've been a runner a lot of my life. I used to run marathons. The old bones don't go that far anymore, but I still love to run. And one of the benefits that I have at the end of my run is I allow myself in my stretching, and the way I stretch is I find myself, I'm in an exploration mode until I find a clover patch. And this here exercise is, for those of you familiar with spiral dynamics, my purple, or an altitude marker's magenta. It's magical for me. How many of you have ever found a 4-leaf clover? Several, maybe half. Great. I have now found somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 4,000. It's a passion, aka perversion, aka, whatever it is, but I love it. And at the end of my runs, what I do is I'm stretching and leaning over and stretching myself and being in relationship with the clover on the ground. And every time I see one, it's a eureka. I found it, and it's fascinating. And when I find it, what I do, and I'm actually at the point now, people who are walking with me notice that I can be walking along the ground and I can actually spot them. You get attuned to it with your perceptual acuity. I can see them as I walk sometimes. Strange, useless knowledge, but it works for me. But what I do when I find it is it exercises my optimism competency as well. I feel lucky. I feel very fortunate that I found it, and what I do is I take it back, and generally I'll put it in a card of one sort or another, and I'll send it to somebody, and basically express my appreciation of whoever they are. It's a sense of gratitude that comes forth. And usually it's to my wife, and how much I love her, and how fortunate I feel to be in relationship with her. And then she gives it back to me, and I put it and press it in my book about relationships. So there's many pieces that come into play in that whole practice. There's aerobic exercise, there's stretching, there is magic in the world, and there is basically reminding me of my appreciation, gratitude of the relationships I have in my life. So think of that as a way of cross-training in terms of life practice, and make it interesting and fun. Thank you.
So that's been quite a tour on the whole idea of what is integral psychotherapy. You can see there are lots and lots of pieces that all feed into it. One piece I might add in terms of cross-training, Bert and I were just talking yesterday or perhaps Saturday about in terms of how spiritual practice informs it. Bert talked about states that you allow you to appreciate things you might otherwise not appreciate. And certainly I think what really, for me, made it clear to me that spiritual practice was an absolutely necessary part of how I was going to show up as a psychotherapist was the first time that I did an extended retreat. It was a 7-day retreat. And I had never done something like that before, and I was expecting transcendent experiences, and I had none. And the entire week was boring and painful and excruciating and dull, and I couldn't believe we were going to sit for another period of time because we had just sit for 45 minutes and another one before that. And it was ordinary, and I was left just confused and disappointed at the end of the week. And I came back to my office where at the time I was struggling with 4 patients with whom I just did not know what to do for them. And for weeks I had just been sitting session after session just taking a position of, well, I'm just going to be with you until something arises, some direction arises that becomes clear of where we should go. And that next week when I came back to my office and saw each of those 4 people, my immediate response, they came in and said the same thing they had been saying for weeks and weeks and weeks. And my immediate response was, oh, it's perfectly obvious what you need. Whereas prior to that week it had been, I have no idea what you need. And it was so clear to me that spending that time in contemplative practice opened my eyes. And it wasn't that there was any direct correlation of a state that I had experienced to anything that was going on with them, but just that it helped me to develop a clarity and a perspective that was really not possible. You know, I could have learned all the theory and practiced all kinds of techniques that I wanted, but it really was contemplative practice that had direct manifestations for me.
You are listening to www.integralnaked.org.